Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. We are two men. I am a man, Jonathan Dunn is my name, and I'm joined by one of my oldest friends.
Do it on the night.
Why not? Why not? We are going around the world in 80 games. It is the night. Right, announcement. Before we dive into our latest jet-setting odyssey, we want to point you in the direction of the proverbial usuals. Firstly, our website, o3c.games. Head there and check out a few things, like the Discord server join link on the homepage, or the support page, where you can fling us some support, either in monetary form through Patreon, or just directly through PayPal, or you can use the handy social media links to share our podcasts on your social media channels. And of course, you can find us on social media. We are at O3C Games and everything. Follow us, subscribe to us, retweet us, rethread us, quote our shit, whatever. Any or all of those is hugely appreciative. Dated. Bon appetit. Literally, if I attempt to go one word off script, that's what happens.
Yeah,
fucking
it's always
stroke.
funny. It's always funny.
Can you smell toast? Oh, God. All right, let me... Hello!
Hello, how are you?
We're back! I'm all right. I'm all right.
Yeah.
It's the month of July. We are the halfway point of 2024, which
Bloody
I don't like that, but there
No.
we go. Our destination this month is South Africa. It's south of Africa. It's I knew somebody once who thought that South Africa just literally meant like the south of Africa, like south, which
it makes sense.
like South America is a continent. They thought South Africa was a continent. It's not. It's a country. What does that country have in store for us? We shall find out. But first, me and Chris need to catch each other up on what we've been playing over the last month. So, Chris, do you want to kick us off with some headlines? Now, go.
I finished The Outer Worlds finally.
Jurassic Park.
Excellent. I didn't enjoy Murder on Eridanus as much as Peril on Gorgon, but both were still a good chunky time. There was a lot of game there. I was really surprised by how much game there was in 2 DLC packs.
A rich duck pie.
I liked how the Eridanus stuff like retooled the game as an investigative murder mystery, but I think it highlighted some of the game's weaknesses that kind of realistically prevent this from being a true all-timer for me. And that's that all the investigation parts amounted to little more than talking to a character until there was no more to say to them to ascertain clues. And then the game would just go, just walk to that marker. That's what you had to go and find. So there was no actual investigation. I wish it just had a bit more agency, because the game always did a really good job at having the feeling of player choice in conversation through like the moral decisions that you have to make. And that was always quite tough to kind of choose sides in big ordeals. But in actual play, this sort of stuff fell well short of like even genre classics like Deus Ex in terms of giving options, and that's 24 years old. In terms of that,
that's grotesque.
Saying, oh, this is where you need to get to, but then you kind of figuring out how to get there. You're going to climb through a window, you're going to sneak around the front, you're going to hack into something. And whereas in the Outer Worlds, it would always have the 3 markers that were like, these are your options, just walk to one and then press the button and that's it.
Yeah.
And that was a bit disappointing, but I did enjoy it. It felt really good to do it all on the Switch, in a weird way. This Final Planet, the Eridanos stuff, ran pretty poorly on the Switch. Again, I think there's much more open, expansive areas. Like a lot of it is in kind of these floating, almost like island type places. The main stuff is set. And that open world, it did struggle with. It would sort of tank the frame rate quite a bit, despite me saying last time, oh, it's very smooth these days. So maybe they just never quite got to optimizing for this last bit. But overall, really good game. Enjoyed it a lot. And a big one to tick off the list. Another game I've played a huge amount of this month, but can't really say too much more. I have kept playing Be Kind to Yourself, the Playdate game that I talked about last month. My top 3 Playdate games now, in no particular order, are Bloom, Sparrow Solitaire, and Be Kind to Yourself.
Wow.
It's up there with the very best. And when we talked about it last month, I'd probably played the game for a good 3 or 4 hours before we reviewed it. Since then, I've played it for, I don't know, 15, 20, 25
Wow.
hours. Just every time I sat down and I've got 5-10 minutes, I play this game.
Yeah.
And at least at the time of recording, it's nice to kind of put a marker in this. I am the world leader across almost every one of the game's leaderboards. The only thing I'm not quite top on is in highest combo by number, not combo by score, because my highest combo by score is a good 1,000,000 points better than second place. But everything else, I am the best in the world, and that is kind of a testament to how much I'm playing it.
Yeah,
but also
how few other people
really...
are playing it.
I didn't want to say that. I was trying to be nice to old Mouflon Cloud to say, hopefully there's a huge pool of people.
Yeah.
You never know. We've said before that the Playdate install base is quite small. But I really, really love it. The flow state that this game achieves is so good. And after playing the game primarily using the D-pad when we reviewed it, I migrated to trying to use the crank again for movement. And it is transformative in how it made a game that already felt really good even greater. Like it's so precise, it's so granular.
I was surprised that you went the D-pad route when you told me about it last month, because I was like, the crank felt incredible playing it like that.
Yeah, it's so crisp.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was surprised by, because I thought in my head, well, a D-pad, you can be more precise. It's just like on or off on the button. I'm moving up, moving down. It will stop as soon as I let go. And I thought the crank would feel a bit more woolly. But the kind of dead zone of the whole thing has been just tooled so perfectly. Within 5 minutes of play, I know exactly where my hand needs to be to get me to an exact point in the screen, like pretty much pixel perfect.
Yeah.
And it's so good that I'm darting between shapes. I'm landing tags on beat through like tiny little windows between spaces, knowing that I can just squeeze one more to my combo if I can just get through this tiny little gap. And it's great, releasing those symmetrical sets, doing great, getting a great score, still playing it every day. Love it. Can't recommend it enough. And that's about it for my little headlines, I reckon.
Boom. What are you playing, Jonathan?
Well, what have you been playing, Jonathan Dunn?
Oh, thanks for that independent thought. I
keep all that in.
Yeah. So my first headline is that I found a new mobile game which I really enjoyed. It's called Subpar Pool, and it's basically a sort of roguelike type twist on pool combined with mini golf.
And we like those things.
You are spawned onto a randomly generated pool table that come in various shapes and sizes. There will be several balls that need to be potted or putted into various holes that are also randomly spawned, and then you are also given a shot limit to do that in. And you need to get through a round of 5 tables to win a run, basically. Then there are always objectives to aim for, which will unlock additional rules, which you can then stack when you start a run in order to fulfill more objectives and unlock more rule cards to apply. And the rule cards basically also introduce all the other mechanics in the game. So it'll be like, oh, you have to play with a big ball, or like glass balls, which shatter if you hit them too many times, and like the heavy balls don't go as far, or play with this stuff. And or it might augment the table, like by making the table bigger or smaller, or having more or less pockets, or all of that sort of stuff. And it gives the game a great amount of variety, and also puts the control of the difficulty and just the experience entirely into your hands. The different rules are all really fun and clever. There's a few different table themes as well, which come with environmental obstacles like conveyor belts or portals and things like that. It's just a really, really good game. It plays well. It's satisfying to play. There's loads of different, like I said, there's loads of variety in there. You can play it in portrait mode with one thumb. So
there we go, 10 out of 10.
Absolutely. I need to be playing it with one thumb so I can give a thumbs up with the other one.
Whoa!
It's it's one of those games that's it's an in-app purchase to unlock the full game, so it's free to download, and you can basically play the first couple of stages and trial it. So yeah, I recommend doing that.
Lovely.
Next headline. Well, there we go. You know, sometimes you'll deliberately buy a shirt in a size too small to help you lose weight.
Motivation shirt, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I bought Jupiter's Picross Lords of the Nazarick on the eShop a very long time ago when I had the full intention of getting into the Overlord anime, of which it's a franchise tie-in.
Did it work?
Well, many years later, I've never got into the anime, and I realised the game basically just sat there, and I totally forgot about it. But then, I realised I had a Jupiter Picross game sat going to waste on my machine. So I was like, oh, you know what? Let's just play through it. And I played through, the whole game, even though I didn't understand the context of the wrapping. I even managed to do the colour Picross puzzles, which
well done.
I really, really love as a twist on the mechanic. Like, I can... as long as the colours are distinct from each other, then I don't really have a problem. But a couple of the puzzles were very, very tricky on my colour blindness. I think there are options to like tint the colours, but I couldn't be bothered to figure it out, to be honest, because it was for the sake of maybe 2 puzzles. And I also finally cracked how to properly do Mega Picross puzzles, which
They're hard.
They are. They're the ones with the clues that straddle like 2 rows or 2 columns, sort of mixed in with other ones. And it's just a whole other sort of rule set that you just sort of need to add into your mental arsenal. And they've always stumped me before, but I sort of persevered and did it and played through, God knows what, 500-600 puzzles and completed the game, and it was great.
Well done.
My interest in picking up Lords of the Nazarick also reignited because I realised just how goddamn good Jupiter are at making Picross games.
Yes.
And this followed my intense disappointment with the Story of Seasons crossover with B-tier Picross game, Pixel Cross, or whatever the cunt it's called. I love a farming game. The idea that I could be solving Picross puzzles whilst potentially gently building a farm, it sounded like a match made in heaven. But for one, there is 0 farming involved.
None at all.
None at all. You solve the puzzles, and then the background of the main menu screen slowly changes.
That feels like a missed opportunity.
Yes, it's entirely passive. It would have been nice to have more crossover of mechanics, even just a little bit, rather than just solving puzzles of cows and wheat. For 2, the actual Picross mechanics are ropey as shit.
Yeah.
There's even, like, it feels like delay and a lack of input recognition when you're moving about, like, the grid, which makes, like, counting and keeping track of your solutions just so insanely aggravating. I'd often make mistakes because I was like, well, I pressed the button 7 times, but it only thought I did it 5, and now I've placed it wrong. And, yeah, it also looks like shit, too, which is a weird thing to say for a Picross game, because it's like, how can you make... It's just squares, but the numbers all look just really pixelated and low res.
Yeah,
it feels and looks like utter dross to play. It's a real shame.
That is a shame.
It is a shame. So bottom line, Shitcross Harvest Moon, no. Picross Lords of Ralph Ranick, yes. One for you. Final headline. I also finally caught up with the Mario Kart 8 DX Booster Pass content.
That took you a while.
It really did. It really did. Just because I just don't pick up Mario Kart very often anymore. Yeah. But I have started doing it because I bought Nora a little controller, and she really likes to play Mario Kart with me. And it's. I mean, obviously she's 3. But Mario Kart has got auto accelerate and steering assist. So basically, she can hold the controller, and if she doesn't do anything, she's taking part in the race.
Yeah.
And if, and it gives her just the chance to sort of just play around, and she likes making the car jump, and she likes picking Princess Peach, and, and obviously likes doing stuff with me, and it's really, really nice. But then often, like, she'll get bored after 1 or 2 races, and I'll put the Switch to sleep, and we'll go and do something else. And then when I pick the Switch up later, Mario Kart's playing. So, let me check out one of those Grand Prix that I've heard so much about. And they're brilliant. like the Mario Kart Tour crossover tracks, which are, sort of inspired by real life capital cities around the world, just fantastic. The handful of like brand new design courses are also really, really good.
Yeah, they're nice.
I really like the bathtub one. It reminded me of Clockwork Knight 2.
Oh.
And the third, I think it was the third sort of world in that was like a bathtub one. But also like the retro remastered tracks, some of them are just phenomenal. Like they nail the translation just so well with brilliant twists. Some of them are a bit more basic. They lack a bit of imagination, but just, I mean, all in all, what an incredible game. What an incredible game it is.
Do you think when we get Mario Kart 9 on the Switch 2, say...
Super Crash Brothers, yep.
Yeah. Are they going to port all this stuff? Or are we going to have a fresh slate? Completely new stuff?
I think the only choice is to have a completely fresh slate.
It's the same with Smash Brothers, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like both games have reached like a saturation point. Yeah, like an apex through just... We've layered and layered things on. And there's kind of nowhere left to go.
Yeah.
And you can't make Mario Kart Racing feel better than it already does.
No.
So you have to kind of say, okay, well, what are we going to tweak to make this something worth experiencing again? And yeah, I think finally it won't be enough to just say we're releasing Mario Kart 8 DX. Like it can't be that. It has to be something else. Like, so we'll see. We'll see.
Even to the point where like I wouldn't be excited if they unveiled Mario Kart 9.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, 16 new tracks. even if they're all brilliant.
Yeah.
I got 1,000 on Mario Kart 8.
Yeah. It's too big now, isn't it? To be
like
worth
the only
it.
way of doing it is bringing it, like reducing it back down, which I think is what they'll end up doing with Smash Brothers, or however that continues. They'll have to bring it back to being like, just like Nintendo Brawl, and it'd be like 10 characters and be really like a totally different sort of experience. And like with Mario Kart, I think the only way to take that series forward is to sort of open it up to other franchises, like they've done with Smash Brothers, and like they've done obviously with the DLC with Zelda and F-Zero and Animal Crossing, and I think Nintendo Kart or Super Crash Brothers would be amazing. Like if you got a stage and a character. Imagine if there was a track and a Imagine if there was a track for every single character there is in Smash Brothers, based on that character in the game.
Yeah.
That would be incredible.
It's the Sega and Sonic All-Stars Racing transformed, whatever the full name is. But that's the kind of way they went, where it was like, do you want a Burning Rangers stage? Do you want a Panzer Dragoon stage? Like, just chuck stuff in that no one really cares about unless you're like a diehard Sega fan. It was very much a game that was like, do you like racing games? Yes. Did you have a Sega Saturn? Yes, this is for you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's that no one cares.
Yeah.
One of the I can't remember which of the cars, because they used to transform between air and water and road. But when you fell in the water, your car just turned into a Dreamcast controller, and I can't remember whose car that was.
Yeah.
But that's great. Like all this stuff is really great,
silly.
and Smash Brothers does that. Like Smash Bros is like that. It's drawing on all these silly things. There's assist characters for like Game & Watch stuff. There's assist characters for Virtual Boy stuff. It's all in there, layered in, and it's kind of rewarding people that have been there for a long time and seen all this stuff. And I think that's got to probably be the direction they take it if they're going to do anything in future, other than just say, do you want more tracks for the same game?
Yeah.
Which is the other option. Just kind of soft relaunch it with the Switch 2 and say, oh, there's another 20 tracks if you want them.
Yeah.
And it's a bit shinier. It's 4K now. That's an option.
And all the tracks are harder. They do like master mode or something.
250cc.
Oh, that'd be mental. I love it. I love how 200cc is just it just doesn't work. It does. And that's why it's great, because it's just like you are too fast. You are too fast. It's great. It's so silly. Did I ever tell you? The Monkey Ball 1 and 2 remake?
Yes,
that came out on the Switch. As a pre-order bonus for that, I got I had like unlocked some skins and stuff, and one of them is I could play as a Sega Saturn in a ball. And that was the entire reason why I pre-ordered it.
Oh,
I pre-ordered it.
Worth it at double the cost. Worth it.
I certainly paid extra for it.
Yeah.
Well, headlines aside, what have we put some big... You know what? Hang on. Let me do a thing. Well, should we talk about some of the games we've put some real hardcore into?
Big chunks.
Big, chunky chunks. And
Heinz Big Soup.
Big Heinz, big chunks.
Yeah.
Chunk. I don't know. I'll tell you what, whilst we're talking about Nintendo, I can tell you about one of the games I've put a lot of hours into over the last month, because I got the remaster of Paper Mario 1000 Year Door.
Did you beat it in
Switch.
a weekend?
I beat it in a week.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it's brilliant. I played the original Paper Mario 1000 Year Door on the GameCube way back when, and I did actually blitz through that in a weekend because I rented it from Blockbuster. So I think I had like 3 days or something. And because I blasted through it so quickly, my memory of the game is pretty hazy, which is probably why I was up for playing the game again. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother double dipping a 30-hour plus turn-based RPG.
Yeah.
And it turns out I basically remembered that you could turn Mario into a paper aeroplane, and that's it.
Yeah.
So this game is just a real delight to experience for the first and a half time, as much as it is experiencing it for the first time, and probably the second and third time too, honestly, because it just oozes style and charm in just every single second of its runtime. Firstly, the paper style conceit is always really fun. Like, it allows for so many moments of silliness and clever subversions of gameplay mechanics, like being able to turn flat sideways and sneak between prison bars or fall through drain grates. You know, it makes you think about every other 2D game you've played and what that would look like if you turned it, you know, end on. Or seeing like characters curled up in paper balls or folded up. It creates the foundation for a beautiful looking game, a game that almost supersedes any dating of its aesthetic. Obviously, the HDness of the upgraded graphics makes all the papery, cardboardy textures look extra tangible and satisfying. Like, the art direction of this game in particular is really, really lovely, because you go into all these different sort of worlds. Essentially, there's 6 or 7 main worlds, and they all look, and they've all got a real distinct style, and obviously that all now looks better. Even though the frame rate is 30 frames per second, under the original 60 frames per second, which it bothers me so little I can barely express it. Especially for a game like Paper Mario, where it actually helps the game look a little bit more like Papercraft stop motion-y. If it's a slightly lower frame rate, they probably could have got away with 15. But most importantly, like, the frame rate is a consistent 30 frames per second, which is immensely preferable than an inconsistent higher frame rate as far as these eyes are concerned, and those eyes, and that is 8 eyes between us. These days.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? There's quite a few moments where there's like hundreds of sprites on screen as well, and it's like, I don't think people understand. Like, I don't think people understand how much more power it takes to do something from SD to HD in the same way from HD to 4K. Yeah. It's not like it is 4 times more. And so you say, oh, the Switch is 4 times more powerful than the GameCube. It's like, that's not what it comes down to. And when you've got like this volume of sprites, this is why we say like Vampire Survivors is a miracle of a port on the Switch. Even though
absolutely.
If you look at a static screenshot, you'd say, what is that?
Blancmange vision, it's
but the animation in Paper Mario is also top class. It's got brilliantly sort of nuanced, expressive characters and enemies that, like, in combination with the excellence of the writing, it made me laugh several times, almost out loud. At least made me make this sound.
And that's worth its weight in gold. Like games do it quite rarely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's rare. Like not to derail what you're saying about this, but we've talked before about how few games are genuinely funny.
Yeah.
And it's because you can only be funny either by a scripted event, and generally, I don't know, it seems that writing is never quite on par as it is in a TV series or a film that is explicitly a comedy.
Yeah, and explicitly passive as well.
Yeah, or it has to be, like we mentioned with Untitled Goose Game, something where you're setting up a joke to deliver on the punchline yourself kind of thing, and then going, oh, it worked, and finding it funny. But otherwise, it's very hard for games to make you genuinely laugh, it feels, because the balance between giving you the controller and taking it away is a strange thing to kind of work with, I think, to still make a player go, oh, that was a funny little joke. It's not easy.
There's one thing in Paper Mario that consistently made me laugh. It happens a few times, and it's when if Mario's talking to somebody and they start going on a little bit, Mario will just start falling asleep, and you don't usually notice that he's starting to fall asleep. You just start thinking, "Oh, this dialogue's going on for a little bit," because you're just reading the dialogue, and you look over to Mario and you see that he's just asleep, and that's really funny.
Yeah.
And also, in what is probably my favourite animation of all time, Mario sometimes gets the opportunity to rest in a bed to recover health and stuff.
Yeah.
And the way he gets into a bed is he'll just jump up and then just slide under the covers. Totally flat, without the bed moving. It's genuinely magical. Like it literally, every time it happened, it literally made me feel tangibly better, tangibly happier. Like every time I see it, it's it's quite phenomenal.
I need to play the game. If it could lift my mood that consistently, I'm
honestly, I don't know what it is. I can tell you this though: it surely isn't getting the coverage that it deserves. That piece of animation, until now. And like I said, the writing in Paper Mario is just really fun. It's subtly subversive as well, like how you'll bump into Luigi at intervals in the game, and he'll just be, oh, what you've been up to? And he's like, well, and he'll just casually tell you what he's been up to, and you realise that he's been on this entire incidental parallel adventure whilst you've been on Mario's.
Yeah.
And it's really silly, and it's just really cleverly done. It's told entirely as just like a casual throwaway. It's very, very clever. And there's a couple of other bits which if you are going to play it, I won't spoil, so I won't say anything.
Yeah, I would like to. It's on my list. Many things are on the list, but it is on the list.
All of the characters have got great personality as well, and the different areas have got a distinct flavour to them, including a very Soviet style area with Russian hat-wearing bob-ombs. This community sheltering from the bitter colds, and it even includes a joke referencing Stalin, which I was a little surprised to see make the modernisation, even though it's very funny.
Yeah.
As an RPG, Paper Mario isn't the deepest of games. There's not a huge amount of strategy at play for the battles beyond choosing what special moves you equip your hammer and jump boots with, and which companion character you choose to go into battle with. But it makes up for that by having the battle system be really interactive, and every single attack that you make comes with a small, like, quick time event button prompt, some sort of something to do that will make the move more effective, including like blocking. You press B or whatever button it is. I assume it's B for blocking it. To at the right time, and you'll take less damage. You press A at the right time, A for attack, and you do more damage. But then sometimes you might need to sort of aim something or wiggle something, and you're always engaged. And then you also have to carefully observe the types of enemies to know what sort of moves are going to be effective against them. If they've got spikes on their heads or something, you know that you can't jump on them because it's going to hurt your little feet. It's even though like the battling, it never really taxes your brain. It's always fun and engaging for at least the runtime of the game. But you can certainly see why Nintendo branched out with more experimental mechanics and gimmicks with subsequent Paper Mario games, because it would be a little bit dull to have these basic mechanics at play for several games in a row.
Yeah.
But also I know that not all of those evolutions of the Paper Mario formula were successful, although the latest one, Origami King, is brilliant, and that like the battle system in that is mad, but it's so much fun. And I did actually pick up I did give a little bit of Paper Mario Sticker Star a whirl on the 3DS.
Oh, really?
And Minty's lambasted it before, and within about 20 minutes I realised how unfun the game was going to be.
Yeah.
Like, the battle mechanics are... the battle mechanics revolve around having these single-use stickers that you find, and they act as your moves, and I was just immediately filled with anxiety that I was going to run out of stickers, and that's not fun.
No, it's a horrible plan.
But Thousand Year Door is probably the purest example of the Paper Mario formula. Everything that's come since, for better and for worse, is built off of this foundation, which is a really, really excellent foundation. Having said that, there are a few elements in the game that do reveal its age a bit. There's a couple of dated mechanics and clunky execution of certain things. Backtracking is still a bit cumbersome, even though they have included a brand new sort of fast travel system and a new hub area that sort of helps. Platforming is still slightly awkward and annoying, which they could have easily amended. Say, like, there's a baby Yoshi that you get and you can ride on, and he does a little flutter, but he doesn't flutter upwards. He just flutters laterally. And it's like, if you'd just included just a Yoshi flutter jump as part of that, that would have helped a huge amount and not impeded anything else. Also, a better map system would have been nice, because this game, at its heart, is actually a Metroidvania. Like, it's pure Metroidvania. It's all of the areas and secrets and stuff are gated by abilities that you'll unlock from Mario. And so a lot of the navigation in the game is quite flat. A standard Metroidvania map would have probably worked fairly well, because I'd lose track of where I was, especially in the underground sections with pipes going every which way. So maybe, but I think that's more of a me problem, I'm realising, because even in a Metroidvania, I'll still check the map 2 or 3 times when I'm in the same room to make sure I'm going. Like, honestly, it's a real pitfall in my brain, that. And speaking of losing track of where I was, it's still an issue I have with the main traversal in the game. Like, because of your flat nature and the fact that you're not playing in stereoscopic 3D, it's really difficult to gauge where you are in terms of depth.
Yeah.
So I was often missing jumps, or missing, or like running into enemies, or not jumping on enemies because I was a fraction off where I thought I was. So I feel like that could have been a little bit more forgiving. But again, these are minor gripes in a game that, like, even without the quality of life features, it holds up incredibly well after 20 years. And it's great that people now have an easier and much prettier way to play this game in this year of our Lord. And it's actually made me a little excited for the remaster of Luigi's Mansion 2 that's coming soon.
I keep forgetting that's coming out, but
yeah,
that could be really nice.
I mean, just playing these games, just with the just incredible Nintendo first-party polish, it's just great. And I think that even looking at the latest trailers for Luigi's Mansion 2, I think graphically it looks a bit bland compared to Luigi's Mansion 3. But that was a very pretty game. But also I found the gameplay a bit bland in that, and I loved the gameplay in Luigi's Mansion 2. So we shall see.
We shall see.
What have you played, big boy?
Well, I'm going to give you another small Playdate update. I don't know if it's worth the jingle. It's only one game, but Playdate all the same. Firstly, a frustration.
You're going to get complaints.
What, for no song?
Yes.
I think you should just
guaranteed
gradually fade it in behind me until it gets louder and louder and overpowers what I'm saying anyway.
What, like an Oscar speech that goes on too long?
Yeah. So, the annoyance. The Playdate web store and on-device catalogue has just decided in the last month or so that my debit card is now barred. Just outright barred. Doesn't work. You can't purchase anything. I removed the card to try and troubleshoot what was going on. I now can't add it back, because if I put in the numbers at all, the Playdate website just says barred. It's been rebuked at the door. I spoke to my bank for half an hour. I spoke to Visa separately for an hour. They have no record of any attempted or failed transactions. So it's all down to panic and what they're doing in terms of their payment processing. And when I spoke to them, their official line to me so far has been, yeah, seems like a problem. But with no answer, no suggestion, no anything. It's very annoying because I've given Panic quite a lot of money and I play my Playdate quite a lot and I promote a lot of Playdate stuff on our TikTok. So it feels like I'm someone that you probably want to let buy things. But regardless, we'll get it sorted at some point, I'm sure. But what that means at the minute is that outside of itch purchases that are side-loaded or donated catalogue keys, I won't be able to play many brand new things on the catalogue for a little bit unless I find an alternative way around it. But luckily, this month, a wonderful developer called NNNN, that's 4 N's, gifted me a copy of their new game Angel Pop to review.
Ooh,
and
good
I
title.
will duly do it because I had already played the demo a while back, and now that the full thing was here, I intended to buy it anyway. So it was, fantastic that they reached out and said, "Would you like this key?" Angel Pop is an attempt at bringing a manic twin-stick shooter to Playdate, which is a platform that has no sticks. So, twin stick with 0 stick. And as I mentioned, I played this when it was a demo. I really enjoyed what was presented in that kind of much earlier iteration. But even then, the control scheme felt like it was a bit uncomfortable over longer play sessions because of this lack of 2 analog sticks, really. So you've got 2 ways that you can control your avatar in Angel Pop. You can move the D-pad and then shoot in locked directions with on the face buttons, or you can move the D-pad and then shoot in all 360 degrees using the crank. And this is really the only way to play properly, given how quickly the bullet and enemy patterns ramp up. But it's not ideal because your left thumb then is having to do a lot of quick movements on the D-pad, whilst also being kind of the main pivot for the whole device. And if the crank is stationary, your character doesn't fire, which also means that if you want to concentrate fire in one direction, you almost need to kind of vibrate your right hand in small little arcs to keep your projectiles moving. Ugh. And it works, and you can get good at it for sure, but it does make your hands cramp up a bit after a while. It's a kind of uncomfortable movement to keep going for a long time. Although I've not yet beat the full 50 stages that are in the retail release of this game, I did beat the 20 that were in the demo before. So I know that with practice, it is learnable, it's doable, you can get better. But it's never like a second nature system like dual sticks. Like, I know I'm complaining about something which is impossible on this device, but it feels much closer in how some old DS games would ask you to use the D-pad and touchscreen in conjunction in order to play first-person titles. So Metroid Prime Hunters never quite felt comfortable because you could move about. It was a bit of a cramp on your left hand, kind of manoeuvring and jumping and everything else, and then a bit painful on your wrist when you were trying to draw on the screen to aim as well. And it's kind of that sort of feeling. You're doing 2 slightly awkward things and never really having full control. But the control gripes aside, the game is a really cool stage-based arcade shooter, essentially. Each stage is a single screen. You fight a wave of enemies that follow predetermined little paths. Once they've all been dispatched, you have a small bonus area where you can collect or shoot little flowers for more score, and then it's off to the next stage. And it's very Robotron 2084 in its setup, which is right up my alley. Yeah. But it's got a kind of mad aesthetic that places all these enemies that look like bees or flowers or washing machines or whatever other nonsense they can think of over a range of these weird, dithered 1-bit photo backgrounds. So every level is like a mad black and white dreamscape. Yeah. Which is, it's impressive how readable it still manages to be on kind of a 1-bit display. More impressive than any of that, though, is that it's a very performant game. Like, if you cast your mind back to when you were playing Core Full and when we watched the Squid God stuff around that, it's another game that's about generating a lot of sprites on screen at once, but they had to make the decision to basically cap how many enemies or collectibles were being rendered to try and keep the game moving along. Yeah. And Angel Pop largely does away with these limits. And by like the 10th stage even, you're easily avoiding 50 or 100 things at once. And it's no mean feat for such a tiny display. It's a hell of a lot going on to still be running at basically as fast as the Playdate can run. Yeah. In its demo form, this could tank the engine a bit, but in its final release, it's pretty much locked, like really smooth. So they have definitely optimized over the last few months to get it up and running. And it's got very, very rare little wobbles, I guess, at its most intense renders when you've got like a screen filled with bullets or whatever. But like I said, it is still readable. Even when it's very chaotic, even when you've got 100 washing machines stomping over an image of a ramen bowl, it still works. And even if sometimes you get a little bit lost when you're kind of like swamped in all that and you can't really see which direction you're firing in, you have to admire the kind of craft and gall to try on a platform like this. The Playdate actually has a few decent shoot 'em ups now, which is an odd genre to have at all on this device.
Yeah.
You've got Gun Trails on the catalogue, which is like a really polished kind of bullet hell shooter. You've got Angel Pop now. But I think both games in their own way kind of highlight why intense Twitch shooters, very impressive to play on the Playdate, but they don't always migrate that well to a device built around this kind of control input, these limited specs, this screen, everything else. Like it's the shmup adjacent games that generally fare better. And I can't be kind to yourself up enough. But even something like Season 1's Battleship Gaudios that we didn't love, it had a lot of faults, but it tried to take kind of a recognisable shoot 'em up wrapper and do something that was different to kind of acknowledge that this is not a super quick display. This is not a particularly readable display when there's lots going on because it's only black or white. And it didn't really succeed, as we noted back in our review. God knows when that was. And Angel Pop is definitely way, way better and more fun. But it could be argued that it was probably better pitched for the limitations of the Playdate specifically. And I find that quite interesting, that the games I've enjoyed the most have always looked at the hardware and said, not what gap do we need to fill, but what can we do that makes sense for this device?
Yeah.
It's not just saying, well, we need a 3D racing game just because. It's got to be something that's like, okay, but does that fit? Is that going to be fun on this device? What do we need to do to kind of make it work? So that sort of decision making, I think, is a big part of developing for kind of a niche handheld like this. I do think, though, Angel Pop is good. It's a great showcase game, and it is something that I really do want to practice and persevere to finish to get to the end of the 50th stage. There's bosses in this that weren't in the demo as well. There's all sorts of other like cool screen effects and stuff that I've really enjoyed seeing and just going, wow, don't know how that works on this thing. And that's really cool to have kind of something to just show off and be like, oh, look what it's doing. But because of that, it's probably not got the staying power of like Playdate's absolute best. So once I do beat it, it'll probably be a case of saying, well, let's just kind of put that way in the drawer now, and maybe in the future I'll have a little run through again. Whereas the ones I really enjoy, like I play Bloom every day till I beat the whole thing. I've played Be Kind to Yourself every time I've had a poo for the last month. It's the stuff that you get hooked
Which
by.
is 3 times. I've seen what you eat.
Vegetarians eat a lot of fibre and vegetables.
A lot of roughage.
But yeah, it's a good game. And again, thank you very much for sending it to me to check out. And I would recommend people, at the very least, go and kind of watch some video footage just to say, how is that running on that thing? Because it is really impressive for that, if nothing else. Back to you in the studio, Jonathan Dunn.
The other game that I've played this month, it's not quite as finger on the pulse as we have been achieving, remarkably, but it's still a very recent release that has captured the adulation of the internet, and that is the Under the Sea set crustacean sensation 3D platforming Souls-like Another Crab's Treasure.
That is another brand new game.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty,
Yeah, that came out like less than a month ago, I swear.
It may, yeah, probably, maybe. I don't know. I felt like I'd put off getting it because I didn't get it straight away because I was like, especially with indie games, I think, I'm very aware that obviously extensive playtesting is never isn't usually an option for indie games. So I always like to give indie games just a little bit of a buffer when they release something, especially if it looks like something I'm really going to enjoy, because I don't want to go into something and then be disappointed.
That's fair enough.
Nobody wants that.
Fair enough.
This is the second game from indie studio Aggro Crab, following a 3D action roguelike set in the world of office work called Going Under, which I did give a bit of a go at, and it really got me thinking about actually how few 3D roguelikes there are, and certainly fewer that I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to play a few. There was I can't remember what it was called. It was something about, I don't know. You're basically Aladdin. You're like a thief in something. City of...
Isn't it City of Clockwork or something like that?
No, it's not that.
I know what you're talking about. Let's work this out. Hang on.
Nintendo Life gave it a 9 out of 10. Hang on. Obviously, hang on. First person roguelike. Not Prince of Persia. Thief. Thief of Persia.
City of Brass.
That's it.
Got it.
There was like a first-person roguelike that I played on the Switch called City of Bras, which was disappointing.
Do that again. Go back.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
It was, but if no one knows we've just spent all this time Googling it, it's not going to have any sort of joke, is it? It's just going to sound like you think it's called City of Brass.
So there was a 3D first-person roguelike game that I played on the Switch called City of Brass, which was like an action thiefy set in some miscellaneous Arabian setting. And yeah, I don't know what it is about maybe the pacing of a game, of a roguelike, where I sort of need a bit more readability of where I am, or things need to be at a certain level of simplicity so that you can more easily keep track of them,
Yeah.
It's why Returnal was so spectacular, because I've no idea how it managed to make essentially a AAA game as a roguelike, and it worked. Anyway, I'm not going to put any of that in because I'm not talking about that game. I'm not even going to mention that it's their second game. It's a whole deleted scene for no one. Right. So I think Another Crab Treasure's main attraction is probably its presentation. This idea of being a little hermit crab without a shell. You're exploring an incredibly realised, colourful, anthropomorphised underwater world filled with eccentric characters, huge, expansive 3D environments populated with crafty enemies and big, gnarly bosses. It's absolutely dripping in charm, thanks to the brilliance of its design and the wittiness of its writing. It's a lot of fun, and you've always got a smile on your face when you're discovering all this world has to offer. Sort of tinged with this really, really good sort of eco-friendly sentiment as well. So like the currency that you harvest in the game from enemies are microplastics that you recover from them.
Oh,
and then
nice.
like the pieces of treasure that you discover and earn are various pieces of rubbish and junk. And you'll find all of like the underwater buildings and the towns and the cities and the castles and the structures. They're all basically made of rubbish that has been dumped in the ocean. It's a nice idea, thinking that the underwater life actually has a purpose for all this rubbish that we've dumped on them.
Yeah.
But it is also made me realise, going, my God, there's going to be so much shit down there that is just... It doesn't look as nice as this because it's not been made into a town or a city. Because
it's just a fucking pile of
it's just
bilge.
killing them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But your main task in the game, apart from getting your home back, is to also find out the source of the pollution, make your underwater world a better place. So in Another Crab's Treasure, you play as this lovely little naive hermit crab called Krill, armed only with a small fork to use as a sword. And your lovely conch shell home is robbed from you right at the outset by a shark.
Oh, meaning?
It's actually one of those plastic grabber sharks that you get in the zoo.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is, yeah, and I don't know whether or not there was somebody I need to unpick some of the lore around that and how that works in this world. But anyway, so you don't have a shell. It leaves you utterly defenseless until you start to utilise the litter that you find scattered around the ocean floor. Maybe you pick up an abandoned drinks can to use as a shell, or a tennis ball, or a coconut, or a shot glass, or a salt shaker, or one of any number of things. That number of things, by the way, is 69. There are 69 different shells to find at the game.
Did you get them all?
Brilliance. No, I haven't yet.
Oh.
I'll come on to that.
Get back on it.
The brilliance of these makeshift shells, aside from obviously being used as armour and being able to hide inside them to defend yourself, they all come with a fitting power-up then to use in battle. So if you're wearing a soda can, you can spit some fizzy bubbles at an enemy. Or like your tennis ball, you can be used as like a rollout device. So you go up inside it and then you batter the enemy. Or if you find... a party popper, you can just blast confetti at an enemy to stun them. Or then if you find something to wear that's potentially edible, like a banana peel or a California sushi roll, if you're wearing that, then the ability is simply called Munch. and then you can just eat the shell and recover some health.
That's pretty cute as well.
Yeah, it's really, really great design. It's always fun, and it keeps you wanting to experiment with using different shells that you find. And it even makes you like excited when your current shell eventually breaks and you need to seek out something else to use. It's reminded me a fair bit of like Tears of the Kingdom in that way, where it's actually the breakability of stuff makes you more creative, more curious, because you want to see you want to see what else the game can do.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, there's even more use for the shells in the game, because you can fuse them to your fork sword to enhance the power of your standard attacks. And again, these are breakable as well, so it keeps your weapon's going to be powered up for a fair bit, and then and then it will break. But it keeps you experimenting with different things as you play through the game. It's really, really fun, and obviously like really varied as well. The enemies in Another Crab's Treasure are all really well designed. Lots of different enemy types and attack types to learn how to manage and combat. The bosses are fittingly enormous and powerful, as you would expect from a Souls-like game. They're brilliantly designed, obviously really, really hard, but you always get really cool abilities and rewards for besting them, including like a whole host of Metroidvania-style movement abilities, which will keep you poring over every inch of the map and revisiting areas to scour for secrets. Traversal and exploration is then fortunately really, really fun as well, and it's surprisingly well realised and varied too for a Souls-like game. It sort of reminded me of Blue Fire on that front, which was absolutely as much a 3D platformer as that is, an action game and a Souls-like as well. Another Crab's Treasure probably isn't quite on the same level of platforming as Blue Fire, but there is so much platforming. You get like a grapple hook for vertical traversal. You've got a great sort of flutter jump, which isn't actually a flutter jump. It's just swimming because you're underwater. There's some really tricky parts of platforming and loads of secrets hidden at the end of lots of platforming gauntlets. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's not a huge game either. I completed it in about 14 hours. I rolled the credits, and then there's still a fair few things for me to find, which I'll certainly go back into and try and find everything, especially now that they've patched in some improvements to the map system in the game, which I had written a bit of a gripe about the map in the game, and then literally I think yesterday I read about the patch that has basically fixed all my frustrations with it. So it's short and sweet. It doesn't outstay its welcome, and I would definitely have played it for longer if there was more. So if they do release, hang on, I've just skipped out a whole thing. What I say? So it's short and sweet. It doesn't outstay its welcome. I definitely would have played more if there was more in there. So it's probably pitched really, really well.
Yeah,
it is a difficult game, as you would expect from a Souls-like, but they have basically handed over full control of how difficult the game is to the player. So you can play on the default hard settings, or turn it down to easier, or a more simple story setting too. But you can also then fine-tune the settings if you want to customize it even more, tweaking, enemy damage, health, whether or not you lose your currency when you die, or you drop your currency. Or if you're really struggling, you can even choose to swap out your shell for a gun. Which you can then kill any enemy in one shot.
Yeah.
And I did have a bit of a go at this once I'd beaten the game. It's really silly. It's great fun. But it's really nice to have a way in for players of any ability or predilection to experience a Souls-like game. But yeah, Another Crab's Treasure. Looks great. Sounds great. It's got some lovely music in there too. It plays great. It is just a real treat of a game. I hope they make DLC or a sequel, because I want more crab.
More gun.
I want more gun crab.
Oh, shall I tell you about the other game I've messed with this month?
Yes, please.
This month, I took on the most grueling tinkering challenge of my Steam Deck career to date.
Oh, I think I know what this is. Because every time I've been playing my Steam Deck, you pop up. It pops up every minute, probably, you saying, Chris Dow is playing Deadly Premonition, Director's Cut.
That's the one. I decided to try and make the famously broken PC port of this game run on the handheld. I don't know why. It's a game I've tried and failed to play to completion several times over the years on different platforms, because it's been on the 360, it was on the PS3, ported to the Switch, it's available different places. But for some reason, one evening recently, I felt inspired, nay compelled, to try and play through the game on the deck properly, fully. For anyone that's not heard of the game at all, it's a heavily, they were definitely contacted by legal department heavily, Twin Peaks inspired survival horror come open world come detective investigation game. And it's always been quite famous for its awkward direction and its quite janky gameplay in places and its iconically strange main character, Francis York Morgan. And if I really wanted to play the game, I could have emulated the PS3 version, I could have just played the Switch game. It's on my shelf. But as with most of these tinker tasks, once I had the thought planted in my head, it became basically a hyperfixation to try and beat the internet consensus that said it would not run. I was sure I could make it happen. So up front, as mentioned, the PC port itself is a mess. Like some machines, if you look through Steam comments and reviews and things, will run the game mostly fine. Some just don't. Some people will experience crashes before the title screen even loads. Some are able to play the game without issue until the game just breaks without rhyme or reason and won't load anymore. Some can get in-game but then have single-digit frame rate performance, even though this game is now like well over a decade old. None of the forum posts complaining about this put me off. none of it deterred me. I was convinced that I could get it running, because there have been cases recently where running through Proton on Linux has actually made some quite broken Windows games suddenly work quite well. So I was like, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to make it happen. So night one, using all of the tinker tricks in my bag, I had reached 2 different punctuation points. It was running, kind of, but if I used a very recent Proton version, that's the kind of compatibility layer that Valve uses to make Windows game work on the Steam Deck, I could get it up and running, but all the cutscenes would either just crash the game or just render black, unskippable scenes. And because of how much of a story game this is, I thought the cutscenes are probably quite important. So I was like, that's not going to do. With a bit messing around with using an older Proton version, so rolling right back, the cutscenes would render. So I was like, oh, I fixed it. But the performance was fine. So I was like, oh, here we go. But the controls didn't work. They were irreparably broken. So the analog sticks would just make your character spin wildly. The triggers would read as camera control. So if you press one of the analog, like left or right triggers, he would just look up and get stuck and you couldn't look down again. Like no amount of Steam input messing or remapping had any impact. So I was like, okay, well, that's fucked. I can't do that either. I have to be able to see the cutscenes, but I also have to be able to move my character. So we got to find something in the middle. So that was the beginning of an entire weekend researching everything about the game to try and figure out why it did the things it did. So I was digging in to try and figure out what drivers made the game work. Like, okay, it's Direct 3D for rendering. It's something called PhysX for physics. It's WinMM for input. It's Windows Media Player for cutscenes. And I was picking through all this stuff.
That's your first problem.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of them. But I was picking through all these things to try and find what the smoking gun was, like the reason why some particular pipeline was failing, what is causing, for instance, the controls to not work, or what is causing the video to not work. And frustratingly, things progressed to the point where I felt I knew what the problems were, but I just could not figure out how to influence things to resolve the situation in any way. As a side note, I get quite excited talking about this because I genuinely enjoy taking on these challenges and learning more about how games work, like how computers work, how this stuff is functioning. And even when I thought I was failing, I was still learning things that might help in the future. So within this game, I was like, oh, that's how you override a driver to work differently. Or, oh, that's how you use the command line in Linux. Like all this stuff that I didn't know before. Yeah. Suddenly it was like, oh, that's another little safeguard I can get around in the future that might help in one of these ridiculous projects. So after what felt like 100 hours of Googling, I found a Reddit thread where a handful of people were talking about re-encoding videos in old games to run better. So I was like, is this going to be the answer? Is it the Windows Media Player problem, like you said? So I was like, it's a really archaic format now. Maybe it just doesn't play nice. Maybe there's a codec missing, something like that. Nope, wasn't that. Deadly Premonition was still stuck at the end of those 2 different prongs. So either listless in control or with a story that was just in perpetual darkness. So I was like, I don't want to stop. But I gave it a rest. I left it for a day or 2. still had the whole thing mulling over in my head whilst I was trying to do other stuff, and I couldn't commit
Like
to playing
teach
anything
children.
else. Yeah, I couldn't commit to playing anything else or doing anything else because it was just like so stuck in my brain. So at this point, honestly, I'm not joking, Steam said I'd played the game for 15 hours despite never having seen more than the intro cutscene. So
I can't tell you how unsurprised I am.
yeah, but I mean, the average would be more than that because the amount of times that it didn't boot at all, that I was still faffing about. So 15 hours of active game is loaded, probably another 30, of getting nowhere. But sat down one night, I had this flash of inspiration. I was like, has anyone looked at input solutions for old games that would remap controls to a more modern standard? Like perhaps that's an option. Because going back to like DOS gaming, we're going right back in time. There was no gamepad standard. It was like you plug something in and the PC would be like, someone's pressing a button. Do you want that to be jump? And it's like, it didn't know, oh, that's an Xbox controller. So it's feeding certain inputs. It was just, something's happening. What do we do? And I had this inspiration. It was like, maybe this game is so weird in its port that it's reading for something like that. And this is where the story starts to brighten. This is where I started to find the solution. Because I found a piece of software called ZIDI, that's Z-I-D-I, if anyone ever needs it in the future, that at its core, it just allows old input drivers to be hooked into more modern libraries like the Xbox controller. And it basically intercepts outdated commands, reroutes them to better work on modern hardware. And it's what Steam Input is essentially doing whenever you play anything on the deck. It's saying, make this game think these buttons are the buttons it needs. And that's what the Steam Deck is doing. But that wasn't working, whereas ZIDI came through because after a lot of fucking about, like a humongous amount of messing about, changing individual settings, being like, all right, now my camera goes the other way, so I must be affecting something. I found the right combination of tweaks, and putting that together with everything else, like the older version of Proton to make the cutscenes work, I could finally play the game. And I believe, generally, I'm the only person currently existent on the Earth that has made Deadly Premonition work on the Steam Deck.
How does that make you feel?
Pretty good in a weird way. Like, the game itself, is it any good? Yes, it's really good. It's really, really good. Like, I'm joking about that. It's great. I played it just non-stop, which for me, I very rarely do for like a story game. I rolled the credits last night after about 25 or so hours of actual playing.
Wow.
And that is something I've never managed to do on the 360 when I had it before, on the Switch when that port came out. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I just couldn't put it down. Like, I'm going to save my proper game thoughts for next month because I've just wasted 10 minutes talking about how to install it. And I'm
don't worry about that. It's all going in the bin.
But I'm also hopeful that next month I'm aiming to 100% it. There's still a lot of like collectibles and side quests that I want to play through and do before I kind of say what I really think about this game. But I would implore anyone with an interest in any of the following to give it a go on your platform of choice, including the Steam Deck, if you want to find my guide on Reddit, because I wrote it up for other people. So Deadly Premonition is borderline essential if you like any of these things, even a little bit. If you like Twin Peaks and the works of David Lynch, it's a given. If you like PlayStation 2 era open world titles, like very specifically that era, because it feels dated even when it came out on the 360. If you are interested in games that egregiously exemplify the teething problems developers faced in the transition to HD, but in a good way. If you appreciate games that bite off way more than they can chew, but somehow are absolutely more than the sum of their parts. If you enjoy very earnest voice acting that belies an often quite wonky script. If you
That's
find
what's going to give it to me.
Some of the lowest quality textures you've ever seen funny, it's worth having a go. This is for me, if you like survival horror that is not in the least bit scary, this is a survival horror game. I did not jump once in 25 hours. Nothing spooked me enough to not play it, and I generally can't play anything. That really
surprises me.
I can't play anything. If you like survival horror that released post Resident Evil 4, but refuses almost aggressively to acknowledge that game existed, because it lifts certain things where you're like, oh, so obviously it will work like that then because of how Resident Evil 4 worked, and it's like, nope, nope, doesn't do it. If you like consistently scene inappropriate music,
brilliant.
The soundtrack is quite limited in the number of tracks they use. So every scene they're like, okay, it's got to be spooky, so we're going to get the wacky sax out. And then another scene we'll be like, we want it to be playful, so we'll have the guy whistling. It's like there's a very limited pool of songs, and it's always funny. This is another great one. If you like sound mixing that seems like it was done by the work experience boy, because in some cutscenes the music gets louder over the people talking until you can't hear them. And I don't know if it's by design or not. Very funny. And as a positive thing, if you like genuinely bonkers stories and really not clever but weird twists in kind of these sorts of mystery type games, really, really good. If any of that made your ears prick up like an excitable dog, Deadly Premonition could be an all-timer for you. If you can persevere through some of the busted, broken bits, it is a very, very good time. And I'm super excited that I was able to play through it on a platform that someone said, no, you can't.
I've just looked it up on Steam, and it is Steam Deck verified.
No, it can't be.
As of the 15th of June.
No. That's a
really.
lie. Like, you're just telling fibs. If that was true, it would only be verified because of my work that someone has figured this out. So honestly, I was going to get really excited if I'd actually made a game more accessible.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's so many people online complaining about crashes. And again, my original thought was that I don't think it's going to be as wonky played through Linux. And it wasn't. Like, there was one crash I experienced that when I researched it, it applies to the switch port even. Like, it's not coded very well for that section. You've got to kind of brute force through it. So whatever platform you play it on, there's a chance the game will just fall apart at that point. So it's not the platform I was playing it on that was the problem. It's just the game. But everything else was very smooth. And considering the Switch runs at maybe 20 frames a second for a lot of like the world traverse and things like that, this was flat 60, completely locked the whole game. Had a great time. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
I'd love it if there was like a demake of this that was like 32-bit. It feels like it should have 32-bit graphics.
Yeah.
Like, what was that game? Polytopia, was it? Something?
Polytopia,
what was it called?
What was that?
No, Paratopic.
Oh, yeah. Paratopic was great. But those sort of visuals could work really well because it would lend more to the creepiness, and I'd probably be more scared than this kind of like slightly waxy sort of, PS3 era sort of character models.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good one.
Around the world. It's over an hour already.
Yeah.
Fuck.
There's quite a lot of chaff to cut out today, though.
No, it's good. It's good chaff.
It's all good.
It's all wheat. Well, here we are. It's the next stop on our worldwide tour of this planet.
Yeah.
It's our 8th stop, and we're in South Africa.
There we go.
Yeah, similar time zone. It's only 2 hours time difference, so that's not too bad. But we have flown all the way from India, so we've actually gone back in time.
Not great for the carbon footprint of this series either, is it?
Oh yeah,
we should have really thought about how we're kind of getting around the map, but
we walked.
Yeah, and the thing is, when it's
if we're making it up,
when it's all hypothetical,
we
who gives a
walked
shit?
and planted trees every mile.
Thanks, Corbyn. 1 billion trees.
Oh, come on. Before we think about the gaming output of South Africa, do you want to know some facts about this country?
Yeah, enlighten me. Come on.
There are 11 official languages for South Africa, of which I know one.
English?
Yep. There are actually 3 official capital cities of South Africa, with Cape Town being the legislative capital, Bloemfontein being the judicial capital, and Pretoria being the... I'm cutting that fact, it's fucking dull. South Africa is home to the highest commercial bungee jump in the world, which is 216 metres.
That is high.
It is high, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's high. The sardine... Here we go. This is what you tuned in for. The sardine fish migration that happens from South Africa's Atlantic coast is so big that the shoals can be seen from space.
That's genuinely amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
The shoals can be up to 15 kilometres long.
Fucking hell. It's a lot of fish, isn't it?
There's so many fish. So many fish. And finally, it can only be technically known as a vuvuzela if it is an annoying single-note brass instrument played at a sporting event in the country of South Africa. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a sparkling wanker horn.
Do you remember that football tournament where it was like the commentators had to apologise every match.
Yeah, it was South Africa 2010.
Yeah, but it's like all you could hear behind,
Yeah,
you could hear
constant.
nothing from the game. It was just
Yep.
amazing.
I got thrown out of a bar that summer because me and my friend we did not have vuvuzelas, but we were pretending that we did. And we did not stop when they asked us to, and we got thrown out.
Well done.
Thanks. Enough about the country. What about the games of the country?
Well,
Chris.
Well. South Africa, much like India before it, is an up-and-comer in the games industry. And although South Africa has long been a country with reasonable wealth in the wider continent, tech and now games from this country have only recently found their feet on the broader world stage. So the list of big-name games developed in South Africa is still pretty slim, though there have been a few notable indies that have managed to cut through. When we set out on our Around the World in 80 Games journey, what was that, 8 episodes ago, we said we wanted to find games made in countries and areas perhaps a little less travelled. But sadly, I would venture that the continent of Africa itself probably is not going to offer too much outside of South Africa's bounty, given that a study in 2021 said that over 40% of all games players in the continent were within South Africa, meaning that the concentration of active developers is probably way higher percentage-wise in terms of where they are dotted around. But games. I've talked at some stage about caretaker games like Tetris, where the goal is to clear a play space, but this was taken literally way before Power Wash Simulator or anything like that in developer Runestorm's 2015 game called Viscera Cleanup Detail, because in that game you're plonked down into the game world as a janitor, hired to tidy up crime scenes and zombie onslaughts or other messy disasters, and it is a first-person game where your broom and mop are your primary weapons, and that came from South Africa.
Oh, nice.
A game called Semblance is a 2018 puzzle platformer that uses kind of soupy, almost like Play-Doh built terrains to aid your little blobs traversal around the play space. And I didn't know this was from South Africa originally, but I did pick it up on the Switch at some stage when it was on a deep eShop discount. So I've played a small chunk, and it seems cool, especially when you are paying pennies, like literally pennies, in the way that eShop has gone, the same way as the Steam shop, essentially, just like endless cheap games. As with Brazil a few episodes ago, Devolver Digital have actually published a few games from the region as well, but this time it may be due to a working relationship they have with the Cape Town-based Free Lives, because quite a few of the notable games from South Africa have been courtesy of Free Lives. They produced a VR title called Gorn, that's Gorn. That's a Free Lives project, and although I've not heard of that one, it's available on all major VR platforms if people did want to check it out. Free Lives made the humorous Genital Jousting party game.
Yeah, I saw that.
That came out back in 2018. I saw it on websites because obviously when you've got a name and you're driving little penises around, people go, oh, might be worth putting on the front page. And, I've not played it, so I can't say if it's any good, but I know it exists. And remarkably, this was not done by intention. Both of the games we're going to cover today in detail are also Free Lives games. So the fact that there is such a limited pool of South African games to have had a big notable release, that both of our games are actually developed by the same company, may make them, at least in the O3C canon, the biggest name in South African development, at least in terms of our research. So in a little bit, I'm going to tell you all about 2015's Broforce, a side-scrolling run and gun. But imminently, Jonathan A. Dunn, would you like to tell us about the much more contemporary game, Terra Nil?
I'd love to tell you about Terra Nil. The day after we recorded the last episode of the podcast and you'd set South Africa as the next country, I downloaded Terra Nil onto my iPad and played through the whole thing in one sitting.
Well, that's quite a positive review.
I hated every second. I didn't. I'm not one for strategy games, really. My brain doesn't just quite work in those ways. But I do also enjoy the satisfaction that comes with neatly building and organising and creating things in strategy games. So long as they're not too taxing, I can sometimes find my way to having a great time with them. And I'm pleased to say that Terra Nil was one of these. So the premise of Terra Nil is that you are put in charge of terraforming a selection of environments, turning them from sort of barren, post-apocalyptic wasteland into flourishing ecosystems, bustling and blooming with fauna and flora, respectively. And the way you do this is a little bit at a time. First, you utilise the natural element. I didn't even think that was funny until I said it.
It's only because of it makes me think of that joke where it's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
First, you use the natural elemental sources of power by building wind turbines, which is always a win in my book for a game to feature wind turbines.
Yep.
And using that power to start sorting the land and sea out. Each environment will have different factors at play, whether that's, some sort of toxic vapors in the air that need cleansing, or lava spewing out of hills or coming up out of the ground, or icy plateaus. And you'll need to combine various pieces of technology to help then adjust the levels of heat and humidity to clean and then plant and pollinate plant life back into existence. And then you try to fashion the right combination of conditions of topography, vegetation, temperature, and climate to bring wildlife back to the regions. You'll end up building huge networks of machines and technology to help get the land to this state, including making monorail systems to help transport different things around to different areas of the map. And I particularly enjoy building these large canopies over forests, which would then increase the humidity. It was just very satisfying. The very, very, very best thing about Terra Nil is that once you've built this amazing technical network to establish a perfectly balanced ecosystem that is fueling the essences of new life, you then go through the process of removing all traces of your presence. So you then have to start packing machinery down. You use the same monorail networks to then mop your way out of the door, so to speak. Working backwards and packing down all of your gear before you then leave the environment altogether as a beautiful, lush land. No evidence of your presence and a huge swell of satisfaction in your heart. Terra Nil is essentially a reverse city builder.
Yeah.
And the integrated tidying up makes for such a satisfying gaming experience that I wasted no time in going through all 4 of the main environments that the game has, eager to get that perfectly clean dopamine hit again and again and again until I'd cleansed the whole planet. One of the really nice things about the fact that you're going to tidy up afterwards, and the fact that you want things to be organic, is I didn't get worried about, I can't place this next to this. Part of my brain says, well, you need to have all these things in a row, so that it's neat. Whereas this, I was like, no, it goes there, no, it goes there, and it's just like a bit of this here, a bit of that there, a bit of this, and it's just really nice and organic. And the fact that you're going to remove all your stuff at the end means I'm just not worried about that. When you have beaten all 4 of the levels, you do unlock alternate versions of those 4 levels, which then have got slightly altered mechanics and characteristics and rule sets to adhere to offer more variety, increased longevity. I just found the whole experience of playing Terra Nil just to be so delightful.
Yeah.
It's got great mechanics. It's really easy to control on the iPad. It's got lovely ASMR sound design. It's got this nice plunky piano music that reminded me a little bit of Breath of the Wild. It's got this great eco-friendly sentiment at its heart, and wind turbines plentiful enough to blow you away. It's also free as part of Netflix games.
Oh, wow.
So,
no excuse.
I will admit that I played it on an easy difficulty setting, so I could just purely enjoy the processes of the game without the stresses. But I can see that it would pose a real strategic challenge to those who are after that sort of gaming experience. And certainly the alternate versions of the 4 levels are designed to be a more, advanced challenge on top of that, to provide a more advanced challenge again. So if you're a strategy gamer, then, you're going to have a great time. If you just like to make things nice, you're going to have a great time. It's lovely. I loved it. I'm really glad I played it.
Top review.
Yeah.
Top review. I've not played it, but I think it's absolutely mad that Terra Nil, given what you've just described, comes from the developer who made Broforce. because it's so different.
Yeah.
So different, and it's a very small development team. Like, I don't think they have like huge numbers. So to kind of have these very carry on.
I'm so sorry, so sorry. There's one thing I really wanted to say, and I just remembered. I don't even know where I could fit that. France have scored. Oh yeah, okay, I'll put it in there. So it's also free as part of Netflix games.
Oh, what a treat!
So, there's something almost like educational about the game. It feels like it could have been made as purely as like an educational tool, like, you know, like those sort of simulator games we used to have on school computers, where you do like rudimentary chemistry stuff or particle stuff or things like that. It feels like it could have been that, but with, like, you know, a lot more polish than you would have got on, like, you know, the B side of an Encarta disc. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, you can stitch it together later. Yeah, well, I'm going to do my little link again then. Given what you have just described in Terra Nil, one, I want to go and play it because it sounds right up my street. But two, it's bananas that this comes from the same developer as Broforce. You know, Free Lives, from what I was researching, it's a very small group of people. It's not a big development house. And I guess it shows that when you are working in a smaller gang like that, you have an idea. If you think you can make something of it, you might as well give it a go. You're not working to kind of like set standards in the same way that, you know, if you produce a first-person shooter and that becomes your bread and butter, players then say, well, they're the people that make that, so that's kind of what I expect next. If you're making stuff like genital jousting and Broforce, it's like, well, who the fuck cares if you're going to make an eco-friendly kind of like clear 'em up simulator? It's like, what? Who cares? Anyway, Broforce. I always find it interesting how certain indie titles can cut through the noise. And it's hard to say kind of why some games find success and others don't. Years and years back, when I still read the website Destructoid for gaming news, so that will kind of give you some idea of how long ago I'm talking about, I remember seeing a preview of Broforce, and this would have been like post-indie boom, so a couple of years after Braid and Super Meat Boy and all those early Xbox Live Arcade hits. And yet Broforce, at the time, with just a PC demo, from what I recall, got given like quite a big write-up at Destructoid and other kind of major news outlets, whilst hundreds of other games that were being developed and released concurrently were just ignored. And it may have been because Broforce's central concept and character is immediately understandable, even from a static screenshot. You control a little pixel analog of a famous action movie star. It might be Indiana Jones, it might be Ellen Ripley, it might be the Terminator, it might be Ash Williams from The Evil Dead. And they've all got silly names that skirt copyright infringement. So you've got B.A. Broracus, you've got Brochette, you've got the Broniversal Soldier. And in each level, you're plonked into these procedurally generated 2D platform stages, and you run and or gun through waves of enemies and obstacles, basically trying to rescue further characters or bros before reaching an extraction point. At that stage, yep.
Is there a character called Rambro?
I think 100% yes. Honestly, I think that is the exact name. I think it's the exact name. So when you get to the extraction point, a helicopter will pick you up. The stage is then bombed into oblivion and razed to the ground, and before you know it, another level has loaded in. Now, to keep things fresh in Broforce, when you rescue a bro, you are forced to switch to that character. And this keeps you on your toes so that you never get too comfortable with a weapon or ability set. So just as you get into the rhythm of using, say, you know, the John McClane analogs machine gun, you'll find yourself having to get to grips with Blade's katana, which I think is called like Broade or bro I don't know.
It's called Braid.
Just, is he actually?
He is, yeah. I've looked it up because he is indeed called Rambro.
Yeah, there we go. So death also forces a character swap with your pool of bros, like secondarily acting as lives as well. And that in itself, just the core concept, it's a really good, silly time. It feels good to play. It's good fun. Now, I first played Broforce via its PlayStation 4 port, which came out a long time after I'd initially seen it written up in about 2016. And I picked it up whenever it got the PlayStation Plus treatment You know, it was free at the time. It just dropped into my library back when I was far more invested in the Sony ecosystem. And I had a great time playing through the entire thing in co-op with my brother Tom.
Nice.
And this is absolutely a throwback game to classic couch co-op. That's where it feels best, with stages turning into like an unreadable mess as up to 4 people are launching grenades or rockets all over the shop, just decimating the terrain because it's all completely destructible. And usually when you're playing like that, decimating yourself in the process as well. Now, doing some quick research, it seems like friendly fire may have been removed or certainly softened in more recent builds of the game, which I think is actually a real shame. Like when I played it the other night, I was playing it just single player just to catch up and remind myself of how it plays. The original setup obviously meant that making progress could sometimes be really tough if players weren't prepared to do just a bit of communication and planning. But equally, it meant that it was riotous fun all the time. Like this game, alongside Crackdown on the Xbox 360, are the co-op games I've enjoyed playing most with Tom over the years. And in both cases, it was because of how easy and funny it was to just fuck over your support. Like,
it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. I remember kicking Tom off the top of a building. We spent over 15 minutes scaling in Crackdown and feeling like I was fully going to piss myself. Like it was so funny. We were doing it over Xbox Live. So he was at university, he was on the headset, and we did that. And then as his character was falling, he was just like, "What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?" And me like wheezing through the headset and waiting until we got to the extraction point in Broforce before dropping like all of my grenades was almost as funny. So it's a shame if this has been stripped out in the game's onward patches and ports, because I think it was a big deal of what I enjoyed. But what makes this game more fun, aside from the co-op stuff, than most simple run and gun action games is how kinetic it all feels. So it's a game that uses liberal screen shake, liberal pixel particle effects, and kind of like bass boosted sound effects that work to really amp everything up, so that even careful play can feel really chaotic, because you might be trying to take a considered approach, and then it just falls apart when you find yourself having to use the bro in black and having to fire the noisy cricket as your weapon that just takes out half the stage and launches yourself halfway across the screen from its recoil. Something I really like about this game is its politics. Like, it's a stupid over-the-top action game, but I think it leans into the hyper-masculine, hyper-patriotic sort of Team America sort of rapping really knowingly. Hollywood films of the 1980s were all obsessed with draping every hero with like an American flag. And although there are exceptions where that was done with kind of a nod and a wink, far too many of them were very straight-faced, sort of just like, well, it's because America's the best country on the planet, isn't it? And that was very much how the script was written and how it got funding. You know, although Broforce is all about chaos and laughs and it's very light-hearted, the fact that it comes from a developer who is not American gives it just a bit more seasoning, because this is kind of like a third party that's sitting outside the US, looking at the media of the time period and, being able to say, we loved it, but also saying, but do you realise how stupid it all is? And when you add in the way that all the enemies are characterised as these sort of generic, nondescript terrorists, and the level end is always triggered by you planting the stars and stripes, and level wrap-ups boast of how you liberate an area before itemising exactly how many baddies you slaughtered. Like, it is saying something. Like, it's being silly, but it's saying something. It's got its own kind of message and its own politics. I'm a huge fan of this one, though, especially if you have powers to play it with. It's available on the PlayStation, like I mentioned, from way back. It's got a PC version, obviously. It's on the Switch, of course. It finally made its way to Xbox platforms, I think late last year, a very late port to the Xbox, but it's there now as well. And wherever you look, it's frequently cheap as chips. Like, I think I bought a digital copy on the Switch that I didn't need. It was just for completion's sake, but for about £2. And then years later, it now has a boxed copy as well, which I picked up as well to kind of have on the shelf and be like, there's Broforce. I like it. It's in the shelf. It's in the collection. But it's absolutely worth having in reserve for like a games night down the line. It's very good fun with other people. And
it's on my wish list.
Yeah, and as a quick aside, if you want to just test this one out for free, if you go on Steam, you can pick up the standalone Expender Bros game, which was an official tie-in to the similarly dumb and similarly knowing Expendables franchise. You know, so you could play as all the characters from those films in little pixel format. And it's only like an hour or two long, that version, but it's free. So if you want to just have a taste, it's there. And you might really enjoy it. So yeah, 2 very good South African games from one very good developer, Free Lives Games.
There we go. Before I wrap up, I've just seen the new game by the Chinese Room has come out.
What is it?
It's called Still Wakes the Deep. It looks utterly stunning.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, just graphically alone, it looks incredible. But it's set on an oil rig off the coast of Scotland. It looks, apparently, it looks incredibly atmospheric.
Yeah.
Wow, that looks amazing.
Wow,
I didn't realise that they did the second Amnesia game.
Did they?
Yeah.
I feel like maybe I saw it written somewhere and just never really connected the dots as to who that was.
I don't know whether or not it was like, oh Christ alive. They did Little Orpheus as well. Which I haven't played. Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on that.
Get on the wish list.
I loved Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and Dear Esther.
I reinstalled Everybody's Gone to the Rapture a while ago on the Steam Deck to see how it looked, and it looks absolutely stunning still.
I'm sure it does.
Like, this is years on. The visuals in that game are about as close to photorealistic as we've had really still.
It
really
looks
holds
like
up.
This is going to give it a run for its money.
Yeah.
It looks utterly incredible. Honestly, I can't quite... It's amazing. It's going to retain its fidelity because of, the pacing of a walking simulator, essentially.
Narrative horror. All horror. Oh.
Did I tell you that I caved and ordered a copy of the collector's edition of the Elden Ring DLC?
What do you get in the collector's edition?
A statue and an art book.
How much
and
was
another
that?
copy of the game. £200. But
fucking hell.
I had a £35 off voucher. So I was like,
you're losing money if you don't.
Basically.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
The worst feeling though is what I would do, the way my brain works, is I'd do that, I'd say, well, I need to buy it because I'm saving £35. So that's the first part of my brain thinking. Then afterwards I'd be like, but now I need to spend the £35 because I was prepared to spend the £35.
Wow.
So the
dangerous.
next level is like, so the money I've saved, really, I'd be stupid if I didn't spend that on something else. So
that's really bad.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
That's really bad.
Great chemistry up here in the way I purchase video games.
Yeah.
Really healthy.
Yeah. My brain just went, well, I earned £750 today for basically doing fuck all, so may as well spend some of it.
Well.
That's not on a house.
Yeah.
Because I know my dad will make up the difference. That's the real thought that goes into it. It was like, if I'm £200 short for the house, I'm pretty sure my dad will give me the money.
What's the point in having the house if it doesn't have an Elden Ring statue in it? So.
Exactly. And he wouldn't give me £200 for the Elden Ring game. So
miserly Ian.
Yeah.
Should we finish this episode?
Oh, yeah, probably should. There we go. South Africa. You got through the whole thing without mentioning... Doesn't matter. Where are we going next, Chris?
It's your choice.
Would you like to know?
Go on, lay it on us. What, are you just spinning a globe in the background now?
Say stop. No. It seems fitting that we're recording this watching the Euros, so of course our next destination is where all the action's happening. We're going to Germany.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
A lot of simulators in Germany.
There's a couple of, there's Schillen games are German.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is cool. Also, Lord of the Rings Gollum.
That might be the one I play.
I know. But also, the latest Heroes of Might and Magic game, Heroes of Might and Magic 7, was developed in Germany. And that is currently, this is another game you might play, it's currently unsupported on Steam Deck. So
let's see.
I'd really love to play it. I'd really love to play it. But if not, I might finally play Fast Remix. There's also The Tourist, which is Schillen Games.
Oh,
which I don't think
no, I didn't, did I? I never played it.
So I was going to, nominate The Tourist or Lord of the Rings Gollum.
Oh, I'm definitely going to talk about NG Dev Games in passing. They make like shoot 'em ups, like old style ones. And that'll
be a nice change for you to talk about that.
But I ordered one of their games on the Switch. that Casper tipped me off that they were having a reprint because they were going for like $200 on eBay, and I just capped out. So I put my order in. They delayed the sale for months. They just never shipped it. And then when they got in touch to say, yeah, yours is going to be unsealed because of a factory problem. And I was like, okay, well, no. I'll take it, but if there's a discount. So they said, yeah, here's a discount. Then the next week they sent me a message saying, yeah, yours isn't coming because we lost it. And I was like, yeah, but I'd quite like the game. And they were like, yeah, there aren't any. So too bad. So I want to just mention them to say, bunch of cunts.
Brilliant.
Awful customer service, the worst I've ever had. Never responded to my message, but that was basically me saying, I assume this is some elaborate joke. Because I was so annoyed. Because again, it's $200 again. So I will never own that game. But never mind. Doesn't matter. Let's finish the episode.
There we go. I can't wait to go to Germany next month.
Yeah.
I mean, the Euros will have finished, but hey, we'll be there playing their games.
Yeah.
Also, not actually there, so that's good as well. For our carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Keep up to date with everything that we're doing. Follow us on social media. We are at O3C Games on everything. Go to our website, o3c.games, hit the Discord join link. Come and join us in the Discord, chat about anything, really, with us. Tell us what you're playing. Get in touch. Give us recommendations of countries to go to next, games to play, discount codes. Just Steam keys, anything. We'll talk about it. Not anything. Hang on. Get in touch, tell us what you're playing, give us suggestions of what you might like us to play or countries you might like us to go to in the future, and gird your loins and be here same time next month.
That's it. First of the month.